Now we are entering into medieval period. Fine. Yes, Saurabh, great. Now see, now try to visualize medieval period first. Then we will be adding points. Is this okay? Done. So, Chalukyas of Kalyani you are asking, right, the founder, Taila II generally, right, considered as the founder. Okay. Done. Okay. So now with fresh approach, try to understand the idea of medieval India, so that in one go you have idea, then we will keep on adding things. You all, without any problem, without any, you can say, preconceived notion, try to visualize medieval India. I am giving you a picture of medieval India. And then we will be taking early medieval India in detail for our examination. Is this okay? Great. See, Ridhima, Shivani, Meenakshi, right, try to understand it. When we say medieval India, we generally divide medieval India into three parts. Like a science student, try to understand it, not a historian, because you will not understand historians, right, quick lecture. So try to understand as a science student. So we can divide medieval India into three parts. First part we call it early medieval India. Second part we call it period of Delhi Sultanate. Third part we will call it what you call Mughal India. So from 8th century AD till 13th century AD, exact date is 1206. This period is called early medieval India. Right, this period is called early medieval India. And then 1206 to 1526, this period is called period of Delhi Sultanate. And from 1526 to 1707, death of Aurangzeb, this period is called Mughal India. So first thing, very simple, very simple. We divide medieval India into three parts: early medieval India, Sultanate, and Mughal India. Early medieval India is 8th century AD to 13th century AD. And this period is very confusing, try to understand it. This period is very confusing, 8th to 13th century AD, very confusing. Why confusing? Because there are many smaller states. In this period you have a bigger state, Sultanate, Mughal. But early medieval period is very confusing. You have many regional states. Is this fine? Many regional states. You will see like this, if you can visualize. Many regional states. And one more problem in this early medieval India is, some of the states, they called themselves as, you can say, state, but they were very small and they were feudal lord. Suppose feudal lord 1, feudal lord 2, feudal lord 3. But they were also calling themselves as Raja, Maharaja. So if you have to dominate them, you need more power, you need bigger titles. So this period we generally divide into, you will see, two parts. Early medieval India, we generally divide this period into two parts. North, early medieval India, and South, early medieval India. South including Deccan. And you know this, that in early medieval India, in South, in the Deccan area, who was the most important player, who was the most important ruler or most important dynasty? I told you Rashtrakutas. Most powerful Rashtrakutas. How Rashtrakutas appeared? Right, they actually, right, appeared after Chalukyas of Vatapi or Badami. And in the south, in the Tamil Nadu area, you will see that there were more, you can say, powerful dynasty called Imperial Cholas. And in north, there were many small kingdoms. Is this fine? So medieval India we can divide into three parts, and now we are talking about early medieval India. Early medieval India, I told you that North India, South India, and in North, a smaller kingdom, feudal lords, and in South, you will see feudalism was not very prominent, and you have Rashtrakutas in the Deccan, and you have Cholas. Is it okay? So should we now discuss this part? This part, early medieval India, age of small kingdoms, fine? Okay. So now we are discussing part 1 of your medieval India, early medieval India. And in part 1 of your early medieval India, I told you that you can understand early medieval India. How? By dividing it. So there was Rashtrakutas, and then there was Cholas. Two very powerful kingdoms. Then there were some small kingdom, but Rashtrakutas and Cholas. Now you should focus on the North India. Try to appreciate North India without any problem. There will be no problem. Just try to understand it. But I told you, very confusing, because this period in North India is also called age of feudalism. In North India, we are saying that this age was age of feudalism. Now your question would be, what is this feudalism? I explained it in doubt session and all, but that I am not considering. Again, I want to tell you. ठीक है? So नॉर्थ में है आप, एज ऑफ फ्यूडलिज्म कहेंगे इसको, इंडियन फ्यूडलिज्म. Now try to understand what is this feudalism for a general study point of view. How this originated? I told you there are many views regarding it, and there is a feudalism in the European history, but therefore we are calling it Indian feudalism. So our feudalism is Indian feudalism. How this feudalism originated in North India? So most of the scholars, they say that it originated from Satvahana period, Deccan, Satvahana period. And in Satvahana period, Satvahana rulers, if you remember, Satkarni, Gautami Putra Satkarni, Vasishtha Putri Pulamai, those Satvahana rulers, they started giving salary, not, you can say, in cash, but they started giving land grants. Fine. So they started giving land grants. So Now their officers had land. Gradually, these officers became more powerful in Gupta period. These officers became more powerful in post-Gupta period. And now they started maintaining army, they started collecting tax, they started calling themselves as Raja. So these officials gradually became Samanta and then they became Lord. So in North India, you will see that, right, there were many smaller lords. We will call them feudal lords. Now try to understand, suppose this feudal lord. What was the condition here? There would be a feudal lord here, and he would be the owner of entire land, and there would be many people working on land. And now these people, those who are working on land, they have no control over the produce and they cannot sell their produce in market. So nothing will come out here or here, nothing. Local production, local consumption. So no scope of trade, no scope of market, no scope of outside contact, nothing. Try to understand the problem of feudalism. What is a feudalism? It's a land-based system. Suppose we are thinking about one area of a feudal lord. Suppose this area we are talking about. There would be a lord, and then there would be many people, they were working on land, and they are producing something not for themselves, not for market, they are producing it for the landowner. They are producing it for the landowner. And what landowner will do? They will consume it, or there will be wastage, but nothing will reach to market. Now you tell me, what kind of economy would be feudal economy? Whether there would be trade and commerce in the feudal economy? Trade and commerce is possible in feudal economy? Yes or no? I will get it. You are getting it or not? Trade and commerce is possible in feudal economy, where landlord is not allowing anyone to sell their product in market. They are producing for the lord. What they will do? Lord, we don't know. They will consume, they will sell, whatever, but they cannot sell. So local consumption, local production, closed economy. I hope you are getting it. And of course, yes, Varun, right? Subsistence economy. Exploitation would be there or not? You tell me, exploitation would be there or not? As a farmer, you are totally dependent on Lord. Whatever you are producing, you are giving to the Lord. Now, if they want to give you something, they are giving. If they don't want to give you something, they are not giving. But you are, demanding, kuch de do. So they are giving you. They are very kind. Trade and commerce not possible. So very simple. Early medieval North India, there was no trade and commerce. Of course, landlord can go to market, but landlords, they were the consumption, you can say, they were not progressive class. They were not selling those things. They were consuming or the wastage. Exploitative system, closed society, closed economy. Those who have sociology, they must be knowing it. There is a system called Jajmani system. So, there was a Jajmani system in this kind of patron-client relationship. There was no scope of coin. You tell me, in this kind of system, what is the scope of coin? There would be no coinage, barter system. No profit for the farmers. Where is the scope of profit? Srishti, no profit. I hope you are getting it. You all are getting now. You all are, your answer suggesting that you all are getting. Right? Isita, how it is different from European feudalism? I will tell you Isita at right time in the world history. Not here, otherwise there would be 100 questions. Right, Isita, you are getting it? So as a teacher, we have to control ourselves, what I am saying. Otherwise, there would be 10 questions, confusing. So it was different from European feudalism, particularly in the military aspect. Closed economy, very good, Prem. Trade, commerce, not possible. Monetization, possible, Prem. Namrita, monetization possible. Do we have coins in this period? No. When there is no trade and commerce, there is no scope of coin. Bonded labor, yes, Moksh Mehta. Bonded labor, yes. There is a term called Vishti. You will see in this period Vishti. Forced labor, bonded labor. Barter economy, yes, me too. Barter economy. Mojida, absolutely correct. Farmers, those who have sociology, they must be knowing it. Karl Marx talked about feudalism, capitalism. So feudalism also two-class exploitation, but forget Karl Marx and those. Try to understand simply as a GS student. I hope that you all are getting now. There is no need to say that this early medieval economy, North Indian economy, what all would be the feature? Suppose you are getting a question. What all would be the feature of this early medieval age? A small kingdom, feudal lords, no trade and commerce, no monetization, closed society, exploitation, dependent on lord, forced labor. Fine, I hope you all started thinking now. Some of the landlords had bigger empire, but most of them, right, they were small landlords. Is it fine? So this kind of system. Now, out of this, suppose this area, one very powerful man, so what he will do? He will try to control all these feudal lords in his area. And we have many land grants, many inscription, epigraphic evidence to suggest that most of the kingdom had many feudal lords. List we are getting. Those who have history, they must be knowing it. In one inscription, we are getting what? That this land was given to X, X gave this land to Y, Y gave this land to Z. So there was sub-infeudation also. Fine. Now you have some idea about early medieval North India, early medieval North India. Then we will come to South India, but early medieval North India. Is it fine? So it was a feudal period, closed society, no monetization. Revival started gradually because when you will introduce trade, decline of feudalism will automatically start. Automatically. In Europe also this happened. You can say start trade, feudal system will start collapsing. And here also this happened. When trade started, feudal system started collapsing. So feudalism is a land-based system. Is it okay? So Amita, right, when they were dependent on feudal lords, they were totally dependent on them for their basic needs also. Anyhow, early medieval North India, you will see this kind of picture. But yes, some of the important, right, you can say, dynasties, they ruled over, you can say, some area in early medieval North India. Now try to understand it. So, in early medieval North India, you will see early medieval North India, you will see that in the western area and in the central India, some new kingdom, those lords, feudal lords, they started calling themselves as Rajputs. So, first important development in this early medieval India was that there were many royal kingdom, powerful lords, and they are not calling themselves as Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaisya, they are calling themselves as Rajputs. So, in early medieval India, first development was there was emergence of Rajputs. Is it fine? And there were Rajputs in this area, and one very powerful Rajput kingdom was Pratihar, right, Chauhans. These were powerful Rajput kingdom, we will discuss. There were, right, many Rajput kingdoms, but yes, what you have to remember that we see the emergence of a new royal kingdom, and they are calling not Kshatriyas, they are saying that we are Rajputs. So, who all were these Rajputs? Some of them called themselves as Agnikul Rajputs, some of them called themselves as Chandrakul Rajputs. So, who all were these Rajputs? Is it okay? And then you will see that some of the kingdoms were not Rajput kingdoms, but there were some other kingdoms also. In east, there was a kingdom called Palas, and after Pala, there was a kingdom called Senas. So, in eastern India, in this early medieval India, you will see Palas and Senas. Is it okay? So, Rajputs now, they are saying that we are not Kshatriyas, we are Rajputs. It is very interesting that we are not Kshatriyas, we are Rajputs. But now we consider what? Rajputs are Kshatriyas. Fine. Then, next important development you will see that, of course, in this area I told you there was Rashtrakutas. And of course, in this part, you will see that there was Cholas. And when in ancient India, Harshavardhan was the ruler, so he made Kannauj, you will see, as a very important place. So, you will see in this period all these Rajputs they were fighting among themselves, and this Rashtrakuta this Pratihara and this Pala, they were also fighting for Kannauj. Two important development I said. In North India, one was emergence of Rajput kingdoms, and they were fighting among themselves. Constant fighting. And second development I said there was one kingdom called Pratihara in the central India. There was one kingdom in Rashtrakuta in the Deccan India, and there was one kingdom in the eastern India, Palas, and they were also fighting. They were fighting for Kannauj, to make Kannauj their headquarter. Why? Because they had this notion that once you will capture Kannauj, you would be the master of India. Prestigious place, strategic place, commercial place, Kannauj. Who made Kannauj strategically important? Harshvardhan. When? In the last phase of ancient India. So Harshvardhan died, but after that, these three kingdoms wanted to capture Kannauj. Pratihara, Rashtrakuta and Palas. They were also fighting. Rajput rulers, they were also fighting. Chauhans, Gahadwals, they were also fighting. Done? Are you getting it? Till now, any problem? Now you have this picture, this image, that in North India, there were two developments. One, Rajputs fighting. Second, right, there was a triangular fight, Pratihara, Rashtrakuta and Palas for Kannauj, and they all were fighting. They all were fighting. Kannauj is near Delhi, Meerut. Fine. Now you tell me, when you have this kind of scenario in your India, what is the general picture you are getting? Can you conclude? Politically, what was the condition in North India? Now you think about, without any reading, you think about. What was the political condition in North India? Constant fighting, a smaller kingdom, no centralized empire. Is it fine? So there was a weak polity or not? You tell me. In North India, you will see that there was a weak polity or not. Weak polity? No, Palas were not Rajput. They never said that they are Rajputs. Most of them, they were Rajput in central India and the western India. Rashtrakuta never claimed that they are Rajputs. Pratihara, yes, there was a claim that they were Rajputs. So what is the general condition? You try to think about it. First is what? No stability, weak polity. They all are fighting. They are talking about this, but they had no idea about this or nation. Is it okay? Weak polity, great. Can we say that this period is also known for weak society? Division in the society, weak society. Can we say that? Can we say that weak military? Weak military. There was no one army, big army, decentralization, fragmentation, no sense of this actually. They were fighting. I hope you are getting it. Can we say this, you all? Weak polity, no stability, weak society, weak military, and full of economic resources. Full of resources. Their temples, right? Full of resources. And most of the resources in temple, North Indian or South Indian, temples. Right. I hope now you started adding what I wanted to say. Absolutely correct, Shivani. Now they are vulnerable. Now they were inviting problem. And from this area, problem, foreign invasion. Economy weak because trade and commerce was not there, but resource, full of resource was there. And they realized it, that when you will enter, we can get something, because they don't have, you can say, proper structure, we can easily. So therefore, in this period, you will see constant attack from outside, from this west. This is fine. So you will see constant attack. Done. I hope that it is interesting. You know this, how we are entering into medieval India, invasion of foreigners, and we prepared ourselves for this kind of invasion, right? Is it all right? We prepared ourselves or not? We invited this trouble. Fine. So because of this resource invasion, and who were invading, who were thinking about this, who wanted to enter into India first, they were the Arab invaders, Arabs. They wanted to enter India. Why we should blame Arab? What about us? You are not united. Not, if not Arab, others will come. You are inviting them. Fine, you all are getting it, no confusion. So internal dispute, problems, no centralization, weak polity, weak society, weak military, invited foreigners, invited foreign invasion. They saw an opportunity and they started coming. Is it okay? Pratiharas, try to understand it. Pratiharas, they were very strong. They were very strong. They tried to stop them, Pratiharas, but they were disturbed by some other Rajput kingdoms, Rashtrakutas, Palas. So gradually Pratihara also became weak. Till Pratihara was strong, they could not enter into central India. But, so, till Pratihara was strong, they could capture Sindh, they could capture some other areas, but they could not enter into central India. But once Pratihara became weak, they started entering into our central India. And once they came to know about your problem, you know this, anyone, if they came to know about your limitation, about your problem, there would be continuous attack. So what this Arab invasion exposed, tell me, this Arab invasion exposed your polity, this Arab invasion exposed your military, this Arab invasion exposed all your weaknesses, and therefore, after Arab invasion, one Ghazni will come, one Ghori will come, and gradually there would be the establishment of Turkish rule in India. Fine. Without any fact, I just wanted to give you an idea, and I think now you are getting what I am trying to suggest. Are you getting it? It is interesting now. Fine. So, what we will do now, we will try to talk about Rajputs. We will try to discuss, right, those kingdom who were involved in that conflict for Kannauj. We will try to mention some smaller kingdom, right, of this period, some smaller kingdom, and then we will try to see, right, how Arab invasion, Ghazni and Ghori, and then the next chapter would be what? You know this, Delhi Sultanate, because Ghori's invasion led to what? Delhi Sultanate. Fine? Right. So we can mention first point, first topic, right? Rajputs. Rajputs. So early medieval India we are taking now. Rajputs. Right. So now whatever we are saying, try to mention it simply, point-wise point, try to understand it, and now you all can link all those things. Is it okay? Done? Fine. So we can mention first Rajputs. First point we can mention that the term Rajput, the term Rajputs, the term Rajput denotes a clan or a tribe. The term Rajputs denotes a tribe or clan, the membership of which claimed themselves as Kshatriyas, Kshatriya Varna. Now, right, you have some confusion about Varna and Jati or caste. So, simply what you have to remember that you have 4 Varnas, but out of that Varna many Jatis emerged. So, Varna is Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Sudra, but gradually out of Brahman also many Jati, out of Kshatriya also many Jati. So, they claim themselves that they are of course from Kshatriya Varna, but gradually Rajput emerged as a separate Jati or separate caste, right. So, they claimed themselves as Kshatriyas, belonging to solar or lunar dynasties, Surjkul or Chandrakul, solar or lunar dynasties, solar or lunar dynasties. Is it okay? So, Rajputs gradually became a separate caste, right. So, emergence of Rajput is the most important development in this period. Now, there are, next point we can mention, there are different theories regarding the origin of Rajputs. There are different theories regarding the origin of Rajput. One theory is foreign origin theory. Foreign origin theory, right, and it is said that foreign invaders, those foreign invaders were gradually Indianized, and later absorbed. So, one theory is that they are actually related to those foreign invaders, Kusanas, Sakas or Hunas. So, those foreign invaders, they have the blood of those foreign invaders, and gradually these foreign invaders were Indianized and absorbed. Is this okay? So, fable, right, it is not audible, you are writing, you are not getting. So, probably there will be some network problem, fable, right. So, just try to, right, handle it. So, foreign origin theory we have to understand, and this has been rejected by most of the scholar, and they say that they were related to some foreign invader, and these foreign invaders were Indianized and absorbed into Indian society. But most of the historian reject it. One historian, Colonel Todd, right, he is known for writing, right, Rajput history, and he, right, favored this foreign origin theory, Colonel Todd. Okay. Then the second theory is most acceptable. It is called indigenous theory. Indigenous theory. Indigenous theory. And in indigenous theory, there are many claims. There are many claims. Like one claim is, according to some scholar, they are connected with Gurjaras. Gurjars. They are connected with Gurjars. They are connected with Gurjaras. Right? Right? Gurjaras. And some historian, they talked about one indigenous theory called Agni Kula theory. Agni Kula theory. Agni Kula theory. Is this fine? So, there are many indigenous theory. One theory, right, tried to relate the origin of Rajput to Gurjaras, and second theory, they tried to talk about, convince us that Agni Kula theory is the most important theory regarding the origin of Rajput, but it is very difficult to believe. Try to understand how. According to this Agni Kula theory, and this theory we can mention that this theory, Agni Kula theory, is mentioned in a book called Prithvi Raj Raso. Prithvi Raj Raso. This theory is mentioned in Prithvi Raj Raso. It is a book by Chand Bardai. It is a book of Chand Bardai. Gurjars, right, Gurjar, right, they are very effective Onkar in the Rajasthan, right, area in the western India. They keep on, asking for more concession, reservation, right. They are always in news, Onkar, right. You would be seeing Gurjars, right. When Sachin Pilot, right, resigned, right, from the Congress, or not resigned, they were, right, thinking about them, the resignation. So, this Gurjars, right, this issue again became important. So, in the Rajasthan area, right, you will see they are very effective. So, these Rajputs, they emerged or they were connected to Gurjars. So, there is a point of view. Done. Okay, right. So, the second theory which is very interesting is called Agni Kula theory of indigenous origin. And where it is mentioned, Agni Kula theory, it is mentioned in Prithvi Raj Raso. Prithvi Raj Raso. Prithvi Raj Raso, and Prithvi Raj Raso is a work of Chand Bardai. Is it okay? If they ask you that where is Agni Kula Raj theory mentioned, it is, your answer would be Prithvi Raj Raso of Chand Bardai. Prithvi Raj Raso is a book by Chand Bardai. Is it okay? And according to this theory, there was a sacrificial fire. There was a sacrificial fire at Mount Abu. Sacrificial fire at Mount Abu. And out of this sacrificial fire, 4 Rajput kingdom emerged. 4 Rajput kingdom emerged. Out of this sacrificial fire, 4 Rajput kingdom emerged. 4 Rajput kingdom emerged out of this sacrificial fire. They can ask you, who all were those Agni Kula Rajputs? So those Rajput who emerged out of this Agni, out of this fire at Mount Abu, they are called Agni Kula Rajputs. So who were those Agni Kula Rajputs? Number one, right? Number one was Pratiharas. Number one, Pratihar. Number two, Paramars. Pratiharas of the central India, Paramars also of the Malwa area, Paramars, right? Paramars of Malwa. Number three, Chauhans of Ajmer, Rajasthan, Chauhans. And number four, Chalukyas of Gujarat. Now you see, there is one more Chalukya Rajput of Gujarat. Chalukyas of Gujarat. Fine. Will you remember it? 4 Rajput kingdom, Agni Kula Rajput and rest were Chandrakula. These are 4 original Rajputs. Chauhans, Pratihars, Paramars, Chauhans and Chalukyas. Is it okay? Pratihar, Paramar, right? Paramar are sometimes also called Pawars, Paramars, and Chauhans are also called Chehman, right? And then Chalukyas of Gujarat, they are called, you can say, the Agni Kula Rajputs. So these Chalukyas of Gujarat, popularly called Solanki Rajputs, Solankis. So in case they are not giving Chalukyas of Gujarat, your answer, right, in your option, so you will mention Solankis of Gujarat. Is it fine? So there were 4 Rajput, Agni Kula Rajputs emerged from the sacrificial fire from Mount Abu. In examination, they can give you 4 or 5 Rajput kingdom and they will ask you, out of these, right, who all were Agni Kula Rajputs? So Pratihar, Paramar, Chauhan, Solankis, or, right, you can say Chalukyas. Solankis are Rajputs. They are also Rajputs. Solankis.